As the clock approached 8 p.m., an unexpected noise rose from Highland Heights, a quiet town in Kentucky. The walls of a small apartment shook with the echo of 6 gunshots. This sound was a harbinger of irreversible events. Within minutes, all lives had changed. On the phone was a young woman. Her voice was remarkably calm. There was no panic. In fact, she spoke to the police officer on the line as if she were recounting someone else's story. "I shot my boyfriend. It was self-defense." When the police arrived at the scene, the situation was clear. A man lay on the ground. His eyes were still open, but he was no longer alive. One of the bullets had hit his face. The others had struck his chest and neck. Blood had spread across the floor like a dark shadow. And lying next to the man on the floor, a young woman still standing a few steps away from the blood. That person was Shayna Hubers. She was only 21 years old. She was attractive, well-educated, and known by those around her as smart. But that night, she had killed a young lawyer named Ryan Poston with 6 bullets. In her own words, to silence him forever. Was this truly just self-defense? Or was it a premeditated murder? Or are there other unknown events behind this incident? In this video, we will examine one of the most controversial cases in American legal history. We will relive that night step by step in light of police reports, interrogation records, and court documents. And in the end, you will decide, was Shayna really a victim? Or was she a cold-blooded manipulator? Ryan Poston was more than just a lawyer in the eyes of his friends. Despite being only 29 years old, he was a smart, charismatic, and ambitious individual who was rapidly rising in his career. These qualities had made him well known in northern Kentucky in a short time. He had graduated from one of the most prestigious law schools and was seen as someone with a bright future. In addition to being social, he was devoted to his family and took care of his appearance. For Ryan, who built his career following in his father's footsteps, success was not just a career goal, but the foundation of his life. Those close to him described him as cool but distant. He had relationships with women, but rushing into things was not his style. Although he was open to a long-term relationship, he was someone who set clear boundaries. It was precisely for this reason that Shayna Hubers' entry into his life would turn Ryan's world upside down. Ryan's life would take a completely different turn in early 2011 as a result of a friend request on Facebook. Shayna Hubers had caught Ryan's attention. At first glance, Shayna seemed to be a perfect success story in her own right. She had studied psychology at the University of Kentucky and graduated with high honors. She had even been accepted into a master's program at Vanderbilt University. Those around her saw her not only as beautiful and intelligent, but also as ambitious. However, her ambition in relationships would lead her to make poor decisions in the future. But it would later become apparent that there was something else about Shayna's personality, a compulsion for control. Shayna, who experienced emotional ups and downs in her relationships, would quickly begin to show signs of her jealousy turning into an obsession after meeting Ryan. Shayna and Ryan's meeting began in a very ordinary way on Facebook. Shayna sent the first message. They met a few days later. They became lovers in a short time. At least, that's what Shayna thought. But in reality, their relationship had been built on a one-sided imbalance from the very beginning. From the outside, their relationship looked like a simple flirtation. However, Shayna saw this relationship as more than just a casual flirtation. She saw it as a future plan. Shortly after their first meeting, she had already started obsessing over Ryan. However, Ryan was cautious about the relationship because he had noticed Shayna's emotional intensity. After their first few meetings, he started telling his friends, "This girl is moving too fast. She's being controlling." Ryan's expectation from this relationship was an occasionally seen relationship. Shayna, on the other hand, wanted to introduce him to her family, build a future together, and always be by his side. Shayna kept sending messages to Ryan, hundreds a day. She kept writing even when she didn't get a reply. Sometimes she would show up at Ryan's door unannounced. During their arguments, Ryan would sometimes throw his phone or start crying. After such incidents, Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship. In his messages, he would explicitly say, "I'm suffocating." However, Shayna refused to accept that the relationship was over, and they soon reconciled. At this point, the relationship was no longer healthy. Shayna wanted to control Ryan, and Ryan was trying to distance himself from her. Some of Ryan's close friends had begun to say, this relationship could be dangerous. Even his cousin had warned him bluntly, "I'm afraid she might do something to you. There's something strange about this girl." Ryan didn't take these words too seriously because he still didn't want to hurt Shayna's feelings. But Shayna's behavior was becoming increasingly extreme. She was checking who Ryan was talking to on social media and sending messages to his female friends, warning them, "Ryan is my boyfriend, stay away." Do you think the alarm bells were starting to ring here? While Ryan kept wanting to break up, do you think Shayna's way of clinging to the relationship was normal? One day, a rumor began circulating among Ryan's friends. Despite not being able to break up with Shayna, Ryan had met someone new on Facebook and was going on a date with her. Moreover, this person was no ordinary individual. She was Audrey Bolt, Miss Ohio 2012, known for her beauty. This information had also reached Shayna's ears, and from that moment on, things took a darker turn. When Shayna found out that Ryan was going to meet Audrey, she was overcome with jealousy and panic. In her messages, she wrote things like, "I can't give you up. If you leave me, I'll die." She called and messaged him repeatedly that day. She even went to his door. The more she couldn't reach Ryan and the more she didn't get a response to her messages, the more persistent she became. Some of these messages are still saved. Ryan's friends were excited about the possibility of his new relationship with Audrey. They believed that this new relationship would be a new beginning in Ryan's life. However, this beginning would never happen. Because that evening, just a few hours before the date, Shayna was at Ryan's door once again. It was Friday evening, October 12, 2012. Ryan was getting ready to go out to dinner with Audrey. He had chosen his jacket and combed his hair. It was almost 8 o'clock. He was alone at home. And then the doorbell rang. It was Shayna. Did Ryan let her in of his own accord? Or did Shayna force her way in? It is not known for certain. But what happened inside would come to light through evidence and Shayna's own statements. Shayna, who had learned about the relationship with Audrey, began arguing with Ryan. The argument between Ryan and Shayna at home quickly escalated. Ryan wanted her to leave. Shayna tried to explain herself once more. She cried. She insisted. Then, at some point, Shayna reached for Ryan's gun and fired. The first bullet hit Ryan in the face. That shot alone could have been fatal. But Shayna didn't stop. She pulled the trigger 6 times. The bullets struck Ryan in the chest, neck, and once again in the face. Ryan died on the spot. Shayna immediately called the police. However, her voice on the phone was oddly calm. She wasn't scared or panicking. Calm, cold, almost emotionless. "I shot my boyfriend. He attacked me. I had to defend myself." Shortly after Shayna called the police, the officers arrived at the scene. When the door opened, the sight that greeted them was truly shocking. Ryan's lifeless body lay on the floor. His eyes were still open. Bullets that had struck his face, chest, and neck had spread blood across the floorboards. And right next to him, Shayna was still there, waiting silently. There were bloodstains on her clothes and gunpowder residue on her hands, but the expression on her face was surprising. Not the panic that fills rivers, but an unsettling calmness. Some police records noted that she sat silently in the room with no expression on her face. When the police arrested Shayna and brought her to the station, it was well past midnight. The incident was still fresh, but Shayna's state of mind remained the same, as if the person who had just died was not her lover. A peaceful silence reigned on her face. When she was taken to the interrogation room, Shayna began to speak before the detectives had even asked a single question. "He attacked me. I had to defend myself, but I wanted to make sure he was dead." The coldness in this sentence caught the attention of the police. In particular, the following words would completely change the course of the investigation. "I think his muscles were twitching after I shot him. I thought he might still be alive. So I shot him a few more times. I wanted to make sure he was really dead." These words were clearly noted in the police report. When the security camera footage was later reviewed, Shayna's actions while alone in the interrogation room during a break in the investigation took the case to a whole new level. While alone in the interrogation room, she sang the hymn "Amazing Grace" at the top of her lungs. She fixed her hair in front of the mirror. She started dancing. When these images leaked onto social media, people stared at the screen in disbelief and said one thing: did this woman really just kill someone? But more importantly, there were serious inconsistencies between Shayna's account and the evidence at the scene. Forensic reports showed that Ryan had been shot while sitting, not standing. The position of the gun indicated that Ryan had not attempted to attack anyone. Most of the bullets had been fired after Ryan had fallen to the ground. In the eyes of the police, Shayna's "I had to defend myself" defense began to lose its credibility in light of this evidence. In the days following the murder, Shayna's past messages and behavior were examined one by one. There were hundreds of messages on Ryan's phone. The messages from Shayna actually pointed to how bad things would get. Some were sent one after another within minutes. Others contained direct threats. "If you leave me, I'll ruin your life. I'll never let you go to anyone else." Moreover, witnesses claimed that Shayna was monitoring Ryan's email and social media accounts and had tried to sneak into his home. A message Ryan sent to a friend just a few days before the incident revealed his desperation and how difficult his situation was. "This girl feels like she's trapped me in a cage. I don't know how to get out without hurting her, but I'm really scared now." This message also revealed how lonely Ryan was in his life. The people around him thought he was successful, strong, and confident. But in reality, he was emotionally exhausted, anxious, and under pressure. Returning to Shayna's interrogation records, other details emerged that stunned the police. When one of the detectives asked how Ryan's family felt, Shayna shrugged and said coldly, "I think his family should thank me. He wanted to have cosmetic surgery on his face and I helped him." After this statement, an eerie silence fell over the interrogation room. Everyone present froze in place. Was it humor, a cold-blooded mockery, or a sign of a much deeper emotional disconnect? Prosecutors added this video to the case file as clear evidence of lack of remorse. Shayna's behavior not only contradicted her self-defense story, but also indicated that the incident was a planned act driven by serious anger and a desire for control. About a year after the incident, the case went to trial, and public interest began to grow. Television, newspapers, and social media were discussing the case. This case divided people and raised the question: could this woman have really been defending herself? Or was this a premeditated murder? The truth would now be revealed in court. As the investigation deepened, new evidence related to the night of the incident came to light. According to the crime scene reports, 6 shots had been fired. Some of the bullets had been fired after Ryan had fallen to the ground. There were no defensive wounds on Ryan's body that could have been caused by Shayna during the altercation. These findings indicated that the attack began suddenly and that Ryan did not even have a chance to respond. At the same time, the statements of neighbors that night were also important. One neighbor said that he heard arguing coming from the house that night, followed by 5 gunshots. After a few seconds of silence, a 6th gunshot. It was almost like an execution. What was strange was that Shayna's defense of "I was scared" did not match the timing of the shots, because if you are scared in a dangerous situation, you shoot once and run away. But here, Shayna had shot Ryan, who was lying on the ground, multiple times. Firing multiple shots in a murder is often interpreted as a crime of passion. In other words, this is not a momentary act of self-defense. It could be an outburst of suppressed emotions. Furthermore, there were no defensive wounds on Ryan's body. This indicated that the attack was very sudden. Moreover, the following 2 sentences Shayna said during the interrogation further heightened the tension. "I had to kill him because I loved him. I shot him. Then he fell to the ground. But I think he was still alive, so I shot him again. I wanted to make sure he was dead, because I was afraid he would turn into a zombie and attack me." A zombie? These statements became one of the most striking moments of the case, because these words not only indicated a murder motivated by jealousy, but also pointed to a dark and terrifying psychological structure, as well as a complex mental state. Shayna's thoughts and words compel us to ask ourselves this question: can love truly justify killing a person? If someone doesn't love you, would you consider killing them a right? What are your thoughts on this matter? Even before it began in 2015, the trial had already turned into a huge media circus, with the murder of Shayna Hubers becoming one of the most talked about events in America. The media constantly broadcast footage of her interrogations, while hundreds of thousands of people on social media debated whether this woman was a genuinely remorseful victim or a cold-blooded killer. One of the most striking things was Shayna's strange behavior during the trial. She appeared calm, composed, and even smiled at the camera from time to time. During the trial, the prosecutor presented Shayna's past behavior, messages, and social media posts as evidence to the jury. In particular, her strange behavior at the police station shocked the jury members. In the footage presented to the jury, Shayna was fixing her hair in the mirror, dancing by herself, and saying with a smile, "I think I'm free to go on a date now." These behaviors resembled those of a theater actor rather than someone who had lost a loved one. Her lawyers argued that Shayna was suffering from a mental disorder and was not in her right mind at the time of the incident. However, the jury found this defense unconvincing. One of the most heart-wrenching moments in the courtroom came when Ryan Poston's mother spoke. Holding a photo of her son, she said through tears, "My son was successful, kind, and full of hope. All he wanted was to live and continue his life. But he died because of the anger of a woman he thought he loved." These words created a great silence in the room, leaving everyone breathless and deeply affected. Returning to the police records, Shayna had stated during questioning that Ryan constantly belittled her, humiliated her, and shattered her self-confidence. She portrayed herself as a victim. However, in another part of the same records, the following words were written: "When I hit him once, he didn't fall. He was in pain. I wanted to help him die." The sentence instantly changed the course of the entire case and the expression on the jury's faces. Because this was no longer just self-defense. This was a deliberate ending, with no fear or survival instinct. It felt more like a desire to take control and end the situation with her own hands. In the evidence from the police interrogation, Shayna's mental state was never stable for a moment. One minute, she was portraying herself as a victim. The next, she was speaking calmly. It was as if she was both defending herself and rewriting the story to suit her own narrative. "I shot him, but he still seemed alive. Maybe he could get up again and harm me, so I kept going." When you hear these words, you can't help but ask yourself, if there really is a threat, does a person shoot to protect themselves or to satisfy their fear? The digital evidence presented to the jury regarding the murder revealed a great deal about Shayna's intentions. There were over 50 messages sent by Shayna to Ryan's phone just hours before the incident. "If you leave me, I'll ruin your life. We'll go to the grave together." This wasn't just about the consequences of a breakup, it was actually a harbinger of an impending disaster. No one saw what happened that night, but according to one neighbor's statement, he heard a loud argument around 8 o'clock followed by 5 gunshots. After a brief silence, there was one more gunshot. This detail was recorded in the police reports as execution-style shooting, because there was a brief pause after the first 5 bullets. The next bullet, however, may have been fired to ensure the victim was dead. What do you think? After examining the evidence, prosecutors classified the incident as a crime of passion. This is because in self-defense situations, 1 or 2 shots are usually fired. But in this case, there were 6 shots. Furthermore, the fact that there were no defensive wounds on Ryan's body supported this theory. This was not a struggle that took place during a fight. This was a one-sided, cold-blooded attack. The prosecutor stated this in court. Shayna's behavior in the interrogation room made her defense even more difficult. With the cameras rolling, she would suddenly stand up and dance, sing hymns to herself, then burst into laughter. She would then look in the mirror, fix her hair, and say loudly, "I guess I'm free to date someone else now." This statement shocked not only the police officers watching the investigation, but also everyone who later saw the footage. The fact that someone who had killed a person with 6 bullets just a few hours earlier could appear so relaxed and mocking weakened the defense attorney's claim that she was in a state of panic. These images strengthened the prosecutor's argument. Honorable members of the jury, there is no fear or remorse on this woman's face. What you see here is the relief that comes after a planned action. In response, the defense adopted a different strategy. They argued that Shayna had mental health issues, and that diagnoses such as depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder had influenced her behavior. They also claimed that Ryan had emotionally abused her. However, these claims were not supported by concrete evidence. There was no doctor's report, nor any witness statements from Ryan's circle. This omission undermined the credibility of the defense. Finally, one of the most emotional moments in the courtroom came when Ryan's cousin took the stand. Ryan wanted to be free. He wanted to get out of this woman's life, but he couldn't. What he was afraid of is here today, in front of all of us. After these words, many people in the courtroom could not hold back their tears. After evaluating the evidence, the jury announced its decision just 5 hours later. Shayna Hubers was found guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge read out the sentence, there was an absolute silence in the courtroom. "You are sentenced to life imprisonment. You may apply for parole after 40 years." This decision gave Ryan's family a sense of justice being served, albeit to some extent. However, this relief would not last long, because an unexpected development led to the case being reheard from the beginning. One of the jurors had concealed a previous criminal conviction during the trial. This person was actually a former convict who had been sentenced for a crime, but had not disclosed this during the jury selection process. This information gave Shayna's lawyers the opportunity to file an appeal on the grounds of violation of the right to a fair trial. And in 2016, the Kentucky Court of Appeals overturned the decision. A new trial will be held for Shayna Hubers. So, even though years had passed since the murder, the trial was starting from scratch. For Ryan's family, this decision meant reliving the same trauma a second time. For the media, it meant the trial would be back in the headlines. In the second trial, which began in 2018, Shayna appeared in court with a different image. Unlike her relaxed demeanor in the first trial, this time she was more controlled. She spoke calmly, appeared unable to hold back her tears, and uttered remorseful words. However, the prosecutor once again presented the strongest evidence to the jury: police interrogation videos, Shayna's own words, and bullet marks on Ryan's body. And there was another surprise witness who would be testifying this time: Audrey Bolt. Yes, she was the Miss Ohio pageant finalist who was supposed to go out to dinner with Ryan that evening. Audrey took the stand as a witness and said that her romantic relationship with Ryan had just begun, and that he wanted to completely break up with Shayna. When she took the stand, the tremor in her voice caught everyone's attention. Ryan wanted to completely break up with Shayna. He told me clearly, "I'm done with her. I'm going to move on with my life." This statement strengthened the argument that Shayna's murder was motivated by jealousy and obsession. The second jury's decision also remained unchanged: first-degree murder. However, this time, the sentence was structured so that he could apply for parole after 25 years. Shayna Hubers is now 34 years old and still in one of Kentucky's highest security women's prisons. She will be eligible to apply for parole in 2040. Ryan Poston was only 29 years old when he died. He was on the brink of a promising career and a hopeful future, but everything ended with a single bullet. His loved ones still remember his desk in his office: open files, unfinished plans. "He just wanted to live his life," his mother said, "but an obsessive love took my son away from us." This case still leaves people with one question: Was Shayna really a malicious, calculated killer? Or was she a young woman in the midst of a mental breakdown, having lost control? This case is not only discussed as a murder file, but also as a striking example of where obsession and emotional violence in relationships can lead. Many people are asking, can constantly messaging your partner and trying to control their life be as dangerous as physical violence? Ryan's cousin, Carissa's words in court succinctly summarize this debate. Shayna didn't just kill Ryan, she shattered our lives. We relive her absence every day. The Shayna Hubers murder case became one of the most talked about cases in the U.S., even making it into documentaries. Especially the footage recorded in the interrogation room and the messages that came out in court made this story way more complicated than just a regular jealousy murder. What do you think? Was Shayna Hubers a monster? Or was she a young woman who had lost her mind? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this case reminds us once again how thin the line between reality and perception can be.